Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now, let's begin. Gregory Harper had learned long ago that some battles couldn't be won with fists or raised voices. The best victories came from patience, planning, and letting your enemies hang themselves with their own rope. He'd built a successful career as a forensic accountant on that principle. And now, watching his 6-year-old daughter Emma practice her lines in the bathroom mirror, he was about to apply it to his personal life. "I'm not mad, Grandma," Emma repeated, her small face serious in the reflection. "Look what I got myself." "Perfect, sweetheart." Gregory leaned against the doorframe, his daughter's backpack clutched in his hand. Inside was something that would change everything, though only he knew it yet. "Remember, no matter what they say or do, you smile. Can you do that?" Emma turned, her dark eyes, his eyes meeting his with understanding beyond her years. "Like you taught me, smile when they think they've won. That's my girl." 3 years of marriage to Michelle Sherman had taught Gregory more about cruelty disguised as family than he'd ever wanted to know. Michelle herself wasn't malicious, just weak. Weak in the face of her mother Victoria's cutting remarks, her father Dennis's dismissive sneers, her sister Tabitha's barely concealed contempt. They'd made their opinion clear from day one. Gregory Harper, son of a factory worker and a nurse, wasn't good enough for their precious Michelle. The fact that Gregory now earned 3 times what Dennis pulled in from his failing real estate ventures didn't matter. The fact that Gregory had paid off Michelle's student loans, bought their house outright, and funded her pottery hobby didn't register. To the Shermans, he would always be cheap blood, their favorite phrase, delivered with Victoria's signature laugh that sounded like glass breaking. He'd endured it for Michelle's sake. She loved her family, despite everything, and he loved her. But they'd made their mistake when they extended their cruelty to Emma. "Dad?" Emma's voice pulled him back. "Are you okay?" Gregory knelt down, meeting her at eye level. "You know what I realized, Em? I spent 3 years trying to be good enough for people who will never think anyone is good enough. But you know who matters? You. Your mom. That's it. And you matter too, Dad." He pulled her into a hug, this fierce little human who'd inherited his spine. "Get your coat. It's showtime." The drive to the Sherman estate took 40 minutes, winding through neighborhoods where the houses grew larger and the hearts smaller. Michelle sat in the passenger seat, unusually quiet. She knew something was coming. Gregory had been different these past few weeks, calmer, almost serene. It was the calm that worried her. "Greg," she started, then stopped. Whatever you're planning, please don't make a scene. It's Christmas Eve." "I'm not planning anything, Michelle. I'm just bringing our daughter to see her grandparents." He kept his eyes on the road, his voice even. "Though I do have to wonder, how many years does a person have to prove themselves before they're considered family?" Michelle's silence was answer enough. The Sherman house sprawled across 2 acres, all stone and glass and imported everything. Dennis had bought it during the real estate boom, right before the market crashed. Gregory knew because he'd quietly reviewed the public records that Dennis was underwater on the mortgage, bleeding money every month to maintain appearances. But appearances were all the Shermans had left. Cars already filled the circular driveway. Tabitha's Range Rover, Victoria's Mercedes, Jordan Browning's BMW, Tabitha's husband, a patent attorney who shared the Shermans' love of looking down on others. The whole clan had gathered for their annual Christmas Eve performance, where they distributed expensive gifts and reminded each other how superior they were. Emma took Gregory's hand as they walked to the door. Her small backpack bounced against her shoulders. Inside was a snow globe she'd bought with her allowance money, a cheap plastic thing from the drugstore with a penguin inside. She'd chosen it herself, wrapped it in newspaper comics, because they couldn't afford wrapping paper this month. The medical bills from Michelle's surgery had cleaned them out temporarily, though Gregory had kept that from the Shermans. They'd only use it as ammunition. But that snow globe wasn't why they were here. The real gift, Gregory's gift, was tucked in his jacket pocket, a flash drive containing 3 years of financial documents, recorded conversations, and enough evidence to turn the Shermans' world inside out. He'd been gathering it slowly, carefully. Every dinner where they mocked him, he recorded. Every loan Dennis had asked for just until the market turns, documented. Every tax return they'd filed fraudulently. Every contractor they'd cheated, every lie they told to maintain their image, he had it all. Gregory Harper hadn't spent years investigating financial crimes for the FBI just to let his daughter be treated like garbage by criminals in expensive clothes. Victoria opened the door herself, dressed in red silk that probably cost more than most people's rent. Her smile was sharp. Michele, darling, and Gregory. His name always came with a pause, as if she had to remind herself to include him. And little Emma. Come in, come in. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine, a professionally decorated Christmas tree dominating the foyer. Beneath it, presents wrapped in gold and silver paper formed a small mountain. Gregory counted quickly 18 gifts visible, probably more in the back room. The Shermans always went overboard on Christmas, using presents as weapons to establish hierarchy. Uncle Greg, a voice boomed from the living room. Jordan Browning appeared, drink already in hand, though it wasn't yet 5 o'clock. Heard you finally finished paying off Michelle's debts. Guess that means you might be able to afford a real gift this year, instead of your usual dollar store specials. Gregory smiled. Oh, I brought something special this year, Jordan. Very special. The living room was full. Dennis held court by the fireplace, telling some story about a deal he'd almost closed. Tabitha perched on the arm of a leather chair. Her 2 boys, Clarence and Eric, both teenagers, sprawled on the couch, playing on their phones. A few cousins and aunts rounded out the crowd, all of them turning as Gregory's family entered. There's our Michelle, Dennis boomed. He crossed the room to hug his daughter, barely glancing at Gregory or Emma. Looking beautiful, as always. Must be all that pottery keeping you young. Hi, Dad. Michelle's voice was small, already diminishing under her family's presence. Victoria swept Emma up in a theatrical hug that was more performance than affection. And our little Emma. My goodness. Are you growing? You must be. What, 5 now? 6, Grandma. I turned 6 in October. Emma's voice stayed level. You sent a card. Did I? Well, of course I did. Victoria set her down quickly. Now, go play with your cousins while the adults talk. But Clarence and Eric didn't acknowledge Emma. They never did. To them, she was the kid from their aunt's mistake marriage, not worth their time. Gregory guided Emma to a chair near the window, away from the crowd. You okay, sweetheart? She nodded, clutching her backpack. I'm okay, Dad. I remember the plan. That's my girl. Just wait for my signal. The next hour was a master class in passive aggression. Victoria served appetizers on crystal plates, making sure everyone saw the price tag she'd deliberately left on the imported cheeses. Dennis cornered Michelle to complain about his business, dropping hints about needing investors. He'd hit Gregory up for $50,000 last year, which Gregory had reluctantly provided, knowing he'd never see it again. Tabitha showed off her new bracelet, courtesy of Jordan's latest bonus, making sure Michelle saw it and understood what real success looked like. And through it all, nobody spoke to Emma. They stepped around her like furniture, ignored her questions, treated her like she wasn't there. Gregory watched it happen, his jaw tight but his expression calm. Let them show their true colors. Let them dig the hole deeper. At 6 o'clock, Victoria clapped her hands. Present time? Everyone to the tree. The family gathered in a semicircle as Victoria and Dennis began distributing gifts. It was a ritual Gregory had observed for 3 Christmases. Now the expensive displays, the oohs and ahs over designer labels and luxury items, the way each gift came with a story designed to highlight the Shermans' wealth and taste. Clarence got the latest gaming console. Eric received a vintage guitar. Tabitha unwrapped a handbag that cost more than Gregory's monthly salary. Michelle got a designer coat that Victoria had picked out, making sure to mention how she'd had to special order it because Michelle's taste was still developing. Jordan got scotch that was older than Gregory. The cousins and aunts received jewelry, tech, expensive bottles of wine. The pile shrank steadily, gold and silver paper, littering the floor like fallout from a wealth explosion. Emma sat in her chair by the window, backpack in her lap, watching. Gregory stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder. He could feel her breathing, steady and calm. She was ready. The pile dwindled. 5 gifts left. Then 3. Then 1. Victoria held the last present, a small box wrapped in silver. She looked around the room with theatrical confusion. Oh my! Did we miss anyone? Let me see. Clarence, Eric, Tabitha, Jordan, Michelle. She ticked off names on her fingers, her rings catching the light. Dennis. Myself. Aunt Clara. Cousin Beth. I think that's everyone. Grandma? Emma's voice was quiet but clear. What about me? The room went silent. Victoria turned, her face a mask of surprise that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, sweetheart, did we? She looked at Dennis, who shrugged with exaggerated helplessness. Did we forget Emma? Tabitha laughed, a sound like her mother's. Oh, Mom, you didn't. Victoria's lips curled into a smile that had nothing to do with warmth. She looked directly at Gregory, making sure he understood this was deliberate, then turned back to Emma with mock sympathy. Oh, darling, I'm so sorry. We must have just, well, I suppose with everything going on. She glanced at Michelle, and with your father's situation being what it is. What situation is that, Victoria? Gregory's voice cut through the room like a knife. Everyone turned. Victoria's smile widened. She'd been waiting for this. For him to lose his temper. To make a scene that would prove he was exactly what she'd always said he was. Common, crude, unsuitable. Well, you know, financial difficulties. Mikael's medical bills. We thought perhaps you couldn't afford to participate fully this year, so we didn't want to embarrass you by highlighting the disparity. The disparity. Gregory repeated the word slowly, tasting it. Between what? Between families, dear. Victoria's voice dripped condescension. Between backgrounds, between blood. She laughed then, that glass-breaking sound. Oh, come now, Gregory. Let's not pretend. We all know Emma's cheap blood. You can't expect her to keep up with. Grandma? Emma's voice interrupted, still calm, still steady. Gregory squeezed her shoulder the signal. She stood up, reaching into her backpack. I'm not mad. Victoria blinked, thrown off her script. What? I'm not mad, Grandma. Emma pulled out the snow globe, wrapped in its newspaper comics. She held it up, and Gregory watched the room take it in this cheap drugstore toy, this pathetic attempt at a present in a room full of luxury. Look what I got myself. The room fell silent, but not for the reason they expected. Gregory stepped forward, reaching into his jacket pocket. His fingers closed around the flash drive. You know what's funny about cheap blood, Victoria? It's honest. It doesn't pretend to be something it's not. It doesn't lie on tax returns. It doesn't file fraudulent insurance claims. It doesn't embezzle from business partners or cheat contractors out of their pay. Dennis's face drained of color. What are you talking about? I'm talking about 3 years of documentation. Gregory held up the flash drive. I'm a forensic accountant. Remember? It's what I do. I find financial crimes. I follow the money. And you people have been very, very busy. Victoria's smile vanished. You're making things up. This is slander. It's evidence. Gregory's voice stayed calm, almost gentle. Dennis, remember that $50,000 you borrowed from me last year? You said it was for a property investment, but it actually went to covering the money you stole from your business partner, Wilson Calhoun. You remember Wilson? The one whose son has cancer? The one you stole $200,000 from and then forced out of the partnership. Dennis took a step back. That's a lie. That's a goddamn lie. It's documented. Bank records, wire transfers, emails. All here. Gregory turned to Victoria. And Victoria, those insurance claims you filed after your break-in last year? The one where you claimed $50,000 in jewelry was stolen? Funny thing, I have photographs of you wearing that jewelry 3 months later at Tabitha's birthday party. Insurance fraud is a felony. Victoria's hand flew to her throat. To the necklace she was wearing right now, one of the pieces she claimed was stolen. Jordan. Gregory's eyes moved to Tabitha's husband, who'd gone very still. Patent attorney, right? Except you never passed the patent bar. You've been practicing without credentials for 2 years, billing clients for services you're not legally allowed to provide. That's fraud too. Also a felony. You son of a bitch, Jordan started forward, but Gregory didn't move. Threaten me in front of witnesses. Please. Add it to the pile. Gregory looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes. I have 3 years of financial records, tax documents, recorded conversations, photographs, email chains. I have evidence of fraud, embezzlement, false insurance claims, tax evasion, and about a dozen building code violations on this house alone. I have enough evidence to put this entire family in prison. You wouldn't. Tabitha's voice shook. Mikael, Tell him. But Mikkel was staring at her family like she was seeing them for the first time. Is it true? Dad? Mom? Is what he's saying true? It's more complicated than Dennis started. But Victoria cut him off. Michele, he's manipulating you. He's jealous of our success. And he's making up lies too. Stop. Michelle's shout surprised everyone, including Gregory. She turned to her mother, tears streaming down her face. Just stop. Stop lying. Stop pretending. She looked at Emma, sitting in her chair with her cheap snow globe. They forgot her on purpose. They excluded a 6-year-old child on purpose. To hurt her. To hurt us. And you think Greg is the problem? Victoria opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Gregory tucked the flash drive back into his pocket. Here's what's going to happen. Emma, Michelle, and I are leaving. You will never contact us again. You will never speak to Emma again. You will never come to our house or attempt to see us. In exchange, I won't send this evidence to the FBI, the IRS, the State Bar Association, and the Insurance Fraud Division. Everyone gets to walk away. You can't. Dennis started. I absolutely can. I've already made copies. 3 different lawyers have sealed files that will be opened if anything happens to me or my family. So here's some free advice. Take the deal. Disappear from our lives. Because if you don't, I will burn you all to the ground and watch you rot in prison. And unlike you, I don't make empty threats. He turned to Emma. Come on, sweetheart. Let's go home. Emma hopped down from her chair, clutching her snow globe. She looked at Victoria one last time. Thank you for the party, Grandma. I hope you have a nice Christmas. The kindness in those words, after everything they'd done to her, hit harder than any insult could have. Victoria actually flinched. Michelle followed them to the door, not looking back at her family. The 3 of them walked out into the cold December night, leaving behind the house full of expensive things and cheap people. As they drove away, Emma unwrapped her snow globe in the back seat. She shook it, watching the fake snow swirl around the plastic penguin. Dad? Are we really never going to see them again? Not if I can help it, sweetheart. Good. She went back to her snow globe, content. I like this present better anyway. I picked it out myself. Michelle reached across the console and took Gregory's hand. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry I let it go on that long. It's over now. We're done with them. He squeezed her hand. We're going to have our own Christmas. Just the 3 of us. No performances, no cruelty, no cheap blood comments. Just us. Can we have pizza? Emma piped up from the back. Real Christmas people eat pizza, right? Gregory laughed, the tension finally breaking. Yeah, sweetheart. Real Christmas people definitely eat pizza. That night, in their modest house with its second-hand furniture and lived-in warmth, the Harper family had the best Christmas Eve they'd ever known. They ate pizza on the floor in front of their small, lopsided tree. Emma played with her snow globe until she fell asleep between her parents, her cheap drugstore toy clutched in her small hands. And Gregory Harper, son of a factory worker and a nurse, husband to a woman finally free of her toxic family, father to a daughter who would never again be told she wasn't good enough. He felt richer than all the Sherman-stolen money could ever make him. But the story didn't end there. It never does when you corner rats. 2 days after Christmas, Gregory was in his home office when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Harper? This is Detective Nelson Stratton with the Financial Crimes Division. I'm calling about a report we received yesterday regarding the Sherman family. Anonymous tip with some very interesting documentation attached. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Gregory leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. I have no idea what you're talking about, Detective. But if someone did send you evidence of financial crimes, I certainly hope you follow up on it. That's your job, isn't it? Indeed it is, Mr. Harper. Indeed it is. A pause. For what it's worth, and this is completely off the record, whoever sent this did a very thorough job. Professional quality work. Almost like they knew exactly what they were doing. Almost like that. Yes. One more thing. The tip also included evidence of some attempts to retaliate. Emails discussing various plans to, quote, destroy Gregory Harper's career and reputation. We take conspiracy very seriously. I appreciate you letting me know, Detective. Happy New Year, Mr. Harper. Gregory hung up and sat in the quiet of his office. Through the wall, he could hear Michelle and Emma laughing at something on TV. His family, his real family. The Sherman family's downfall would be spectacular and public. Dennis's business partners would soon discover the embezzlement. Victoria would face insurance fraud charges. Jordan would be disbarred and likely prosecuted for fraud. And the IRS, well, the IRS never forgot, and they never forgave. Gregory had waited 3 years for this. 3 years of swallowing his pride, enduring their cruelty, watching them hurt the people he loved. But he'd learned patience from his father, the factory worker who taught him that the best revenge was living well. And he'd learned justice from his mother, the nurse who taught him that sometimes good people had to stand up to bad people, even when it was hard. But there was one more move to make. Gregory opened his laptop and composed an email to Wilson Calhoun, Dennis's former business partner, the one whose son had cancer, the one who'd been stolen from and ruined. In the email, Gregory attached evidence of Dennis's embezzlement, along with information on how to file a civil suit for damages. The Sherman family had assets that could be seized. Wilson's son deserved better treatment than the local clinic could provide. He hit send and closed the laptop. "Dad," Emma called from the living room. "Come watch. They're showing penguins." Gregory smiled and stood up. He'd spent enough time thinking about the Shermans. They weren't worth another second of his life. In the living room, Emma was bouncing on the couch, pointing at the TV where a nature documentary showed penguins waddling across ice. Michelle had her pottery wheel set up in the corner she'd started creating again, more freely now, without her mother's critical voice in her head. This was what mattered. This small, imperfect, beautiful life they'd built. Gregory settled onto the couch, Emma immediately climbing into his lap. On the screen, a penguin slipped on the ice and tumbled down a small hill. Emma giggled, shaking her snow globe so the fake snow fell on her plastic penguin friend. "Dad?" she asked without looking away from the TV. "Are we cheap blood?" Michelle froze at her pottery wheel. Gregory felt his chest tighten, but Emma's voice held no pain, just curiosity. "No, sweetheart. We're not cheap. We're priceless." He kissed the top of her head. "We're the kind of people who work hard, love deeply, and don't treat others like garbage. That makes us richer than people with all the money in the world, but no kindness in their hearts." "Oh." Emma thought about this. "Good. I like being priceless." "Me too, Em. Me too." A week later, the news broke. Local real estate developer Dennis Sherman arrested for embezzlement. His wife Victoria charged with insurance fraud. Jordan Browning disbarred pending criminal investigation. The story made the local papers, then the regional news. The Sherman estate went up for auction to pay restitution to Dennis's victims. The family's carefully constructed image shattered in spectacular fashion. Gregory didn't gloat. He didn't even watch the news coverage. He just went to work, came home to his family, and lived his life. That was the real victory, not their destruction, but his freedom from them. But there was one final encounter. A month after everything fell apart, Gregory was at the grocery store with Emma when he saw Tabitha in the frozen food aisle. She looked smaller somehow, diminished without her expensive clothes and superior attitude. Her cart held store-brand items and sale products. She saw him and froze. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the frozen pizzas. Then Emma tugged on Gregory's sleeve. "Dad, can we get ice cream? The cheap kind that comes in the big tub? It tastes better than the fancy stuff Grandma used to have." It was an innocent comment, but Tabitha's face crumpled. She turned and hurried away, abandoning her cart. Gregory felt no satisfaction in her pain, just a quiet sense of justice served. She'd learned what it meant to struggle now. Maybe she'd become a better person for it. Or maybe she wouldn't. Either way, it was no longer his problem. "Yeah, Em. We can get the cheap ice cream. The best things in life usually are cheap, you know." Emma grinned up at him. "Like my penguin snow globe?" "Exactly like that." They finished shopping and drove home, where Michelle had dinner waiting spaghetti with jarred sauce, nothing fancy, but made with love. They ate together at their scratched kitchen table, talking about their days, making plans for the weekend. Emma had her snow globe on the table beside her plate, because she took it everywhere now. It had become her talisman, her reminder that she didn't need expensive things to be valuable. After dinner, while Michele gave Emma a bath, Gregory stood on their small back porch looking at the stars. His phone buzzed a text from Wilson Calhoun. "Mr. Harper, I don't know how to thank you. The lawsuit is moving forward, and my attorney says we have an excellent case. The money from the settlement will cover Jamie's treatment. You saved my son's life. If there's ever anything I can do for you, anything at all, you just say the word." Gregory typed back, "Take care of your son. That's all the thanks I need." He pocketed his phone and breathed in the cold night air. His life was good. Not perfect. They still struggled with bills sometimes, still had to budget carefully, still worried about the future. But they had something the Shermans never had and never would. They had each other, and they had their integrity intact. Inside, Emma laughed at something Michelle said. The sound floated through the window, pure and joyful, untainted by cruelty or malice. Gregory smiled and went back inside, closing the door on the cold and the past. Tomorrow was Saturday, and he'd promised Emma they'd go to the park if the weather held. Simple pleasures, the kind you couldn't buy, only earned through love and presence. As he climbed the stairs to tuck Emma in, he passed the small shelf where she'd placed her snow globe in a position of honor. The plastic penguin smiled up at him, forever cheerful in its perpetual snowstorm. "Priceless," Gregory murmured, and meant it. The Shermans would face their trials, their scandals, their consequences. Dennis would likely see prison time. Victoria would pay massive fines and restitution. Jordan had already lost his license and faced criminal charges. Tabitha, guilty only by association and silence, would have to rebuild her life with the knowledge that she'd stood by while her family destroyed themselves and hurt innocent people. But that was their story now, not Gregory's. He'd given them the rope, but they'd tied the nooses themselves. Every fraudulent document, every stolen dollar, every cruel word to a 6-year-old child, those were their choices, and now they'd live with the consequences. Gregory Harper had played his part perfectly. The patient accountant, the quiet record keeper, the man who'd endured everything until the moment was right. Then he'd struck with precision, not in anger, but in justice, giving them exactly what they deserved: accountability. And now, with his daughter tucked safely in bed, his wife reading beside him, and his conscience clear, Gregory Harper could finally rest. Not because he'd destroyed his enemies, but because he'd protected his family and stood up for what was right. In the end, that was all that mattered. Not blood cheap or expensive, but love. The kind that fought for itself, the kind that refused to be diminished. The kind that taught a 6-year-old girl that a drugstore snow globe chosen with love was worth more than all the designer gifts in the world. That was the real gift Emma had given herself that Christmas Eve, the understanding that she was enough exactly as she was. And Gregory, in his own way, had given her something too: the knowledge that good people don't have to accept cruelty, that justice exists, and that sometimes the underdogs win. Not because they're stronger or richer or better bred, but because they're smarter, more patient, and willing to do what's necessary when the moment arrives. And as Gregory drifted off to sleep, his last thought was a simple one. Merry Christmas to us, the real family, the priceless one. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Hello, and welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. Your support means everything to us. We'd love to know, which geographical location are you joining from today? At home? On the go? Share with us below. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Empire of Frost. Dominic Frost stepped onto the helipad of Frost Tower, the wind whipping his custom suit against his athletic frame. At 43, Dom had built Frost Innovation from a garage startup into a biotech empire worth billions. The helicopter blade slowed as he surveyed downtown Boston, a city he'd conquered through brilliance and an unflinching resolve that both impressed and terrified his peers. "Another acquisition closed?" asked Bernard Willis, Dom's head of security, as they entered the private elevator. "Meridian Sciences couldn't refuse our final offer," Dom replied, a cold smile forming. "Their board folded when I mentioned certain regulatory issues they've been hiding." This was how Dominic operated: thorough intelligence, leverage, and calculated pressure. He'd emerged from the shadows of South Boston's toughest neighborhood, clawing his way into MIT on scholarship before revolutionizing medical equipment manufacturing. Those early years shaped his philosophy: trust few, forgive none, and always hold the stronger hand. The elevator doors opened to Dom's executive suite. Autumn Rios, his fiercely loyal chief of staff, handed him a coffee exactly as he preferred it. "Your wife called," Autumn said, keeping pace as they walked. "She wants to confirm dinner with the Bowmans tonight." Dom nodded, though his jaw tightened imperceptibly. Vivian had been acting strange lately, distracted, distant. After 12 years of marriage, he recognized the signs of deception. He'd hired discreet surveillance 2 weeks ago, but had yet to report anything concrete. "Something else," Autumn continued, lowering her voice. "Those background searches you requested? Results are in your secure inbox." Dom paused at his office door. The Bowmans and Dr. Reynolds? And the others, yes. Dom had been vetting his entire social circle since noticing Vivian's behavior change. Trust was rational only with complete information, a principle that had saved him countless times. That evening at Vivian's favorite restaurant, Dom studied his wife while pretending to check his phone. At 38, Vivian Frost remained breathtakingly beautiful, her elegant posture and warm laugh masking an ambitious woman who'd left a promising career as a pharmaceutical researcher to support his rise. Their marriage had always been more partnership than passion, but worked. Until now. "Dom, you're missing Sheila's story," Vivian chided, touching his arm. Her emerald pendant, his gift on their 10th anniversary, caught the light. He smiled apologetically at the Bowmans while noting how Vivian's fingers lingered on his sleeve, a performance he now recognized as rehearsed. "Parker Reynolds sends his regrets," Richard Bowman said, swirling his scotch. "Called away on some medical emergency." Again, Dom watched Vivian's expression carefully. Dr. Parker Reynolds, brilliant neurosurgeon, recent divorce, and newest member of their social circle. The slight tensing of Vivian's shoulders at the mention of Reynolds' name confirmed his suspicions. Later that night, as Vivian slept, Dom reviewed the surveillance report on his encrypted tablet. GPS tracking showed 17 coincidental locations where both Vivian and Reynolds had been in the past month. Phone records revealed text messages deleted immediately after reading. Nothing explicit, but a pattern emerging. Dom closed the tablet, surprising himself with his own calmness. He felt no rage, only a cold, calculating clarity. Vivian had forgotten who she married, a man who'd survived by anticipating betrayal and eliminating threats before they materialized. He wouldn't confront her. Not yet. First, he needed to understand the full scope of her deception. 1 week later, everything changed. Vivian announced her pregnancy. 8 weeks along, she said, tears of apparent joy streaming down her face. "We're finally going to be parents, Dom." He embraced her, his mind racing through possibilities, timelines, and a darkness he hadn't felt since his youth. The child might be his. They'd been trying for years despite his ambivalence about fatherhood. But the timing aligned too perfectly with her growing closeness to Reynolds. Dom kissed his wife's forehead, already plotting the DNA test that would determine much more than paternity. "I've never been happier," he lied, with such conviction that Vivian believed him completely. Chapter 2. Veiled Connections. The pregnancy transformed their marriage, at least on the surface. Dom pivoted his strategy, becoming the model expectant father, attending every appointment, redecorating the guest wing into a nursery, and publicly doting on Vivian with extravagant gestures that made headlines in Boston society pages. Privately, he compiled evidence. Dom was playing a long game, one where Vivian and Reynolds would reveal themselves through complacency. On a crisp October morning, Dom deliberately left for a business trip to Chicago. Instead, he set up in a secondary Frost Innovations facility across town, monitoring the sophisticated surveillance system Bernard had installed throughout their Beacon Hill mansion. It took less than 6 hours for Reynolds to arrive. Dom watched impassively as Vivian welcomed her lover into their home, in a space as Dom had built with the wealth of his intellect and determination. Their conversation, captured by high-fidelity microphones, confirmed everything. "The baby is definitely yours," Vivian said between kisses. "The timeline matches perfectly." Reynolds looked simultaneously elated and terrified. What if he suspects? Dom Frost isn't a man to cross Vivian. He doesn't, and soon it won't matter. Once the baby is born, I'll file for divorce. With his heir in my custody, I'll get half of everything. Dom felt nothing watching them together. Not heartbreak, not even anger. Only a cold, clarifying purpose that hardened his resolve. They had made a catastrophic error in judgment. Not the affair itself, but in threatening what was his. The next day, Dom returned home as scheduled, kissing Vivian's cheek as if nothing had changed. What she interpreted as love was patient, methodical reconnaissance. 2 months into the pregnancy, Dom orchestrated a chance meeting with Reynolds at a hospital charity gala. The doctor visibly paled when Dom approached, champagne flute in hand. "Parker, Vivian speaks so highly of your work. She's convinced you're revolutionizing neurological treatment." Reynolds stammered through pleasantries while Dom studied him. Conventionally handsome, prestigious career, but ultimately weak. A man who'd crumble under real pressure. "Actually," Dom continued, "I'd love your professional opinion on a new medical technology we're developing. Perhaps you could consult? The compensation would be substantial." The trap was baited with precision. Reynolds, unable to decline without arousing suspicion, agreed. Dom now had legitimate reason to meet with his wife's lover regularly, to monitor him closely while implementing the early stages of a plan that would leave nothing to chance. As Vivian's pregnancy progressed, Dom cultivated unexpected allies. He struck up a friendship with Melissa Dawson, a senior labor and delivery nurse at Boston Memorial, where Vivian would deliver. Their connection began innocuously at a hospital fundraiser, but Dom recognized Melissa's resentment toward the wealthy patients she served, especially after discovering her substantial medical debt from her own daughter's treatments. "The system's rigged," Melissa confided after several meetings, unaware she was being carefully manipulated. "People like your wife waltz in expecting royal treatment, while families like mine go bankrupt keeping our children alive." Dom nodded sympathetically. "The inequity is staggering. I've been thinking about creating a foundation to address exactly this issue." He paused thoughtfully. Someone with your insights could be invaluable in shaping such an initiative. The implied financial opportunity wasn't lost on Melissa. Dom had found her price long before offering to pay it. Meanwhile, Dom cultivated his relationship with Theo Simmons, his oldest friend from South Boston. Unlike Dom, Theo had never escaped their neighborhood's gravitational pull, drifting between legitimate businesses and occasional criminality. He remained fiercely loyal to Dom, who had bailed him out of numerous situations over the years. "I need something untraceable," Dom told Theo during a midnight meeting at an old boxing gym they'd frequented as teenagers. "Medical-grade surveillance that can't be detected by hospital security." Theo didn't ask questions. "I know a guy who supplies equipment to federal agencies. Give me 3 days." By Vivian's 3rd trimester, Dom had assembled all the necessary components for his countermove. The nanny cam, disguised as an innocuous digital photo frame showing proud family moments, would be Vivian's gift to place in the delivery room. Unknown to anyone, it contained military-grade recording technology that transmitted directly to Dom's secure server. In the final month of pregnancy, Dom increased his business travel, creating the impression of a devoted husband rushing back for important appointments. In reality, he was methodically removing traces of his true wealth from Vivian's reach, transferring assets to untraceable accounts, restructuring corporate ownership, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. The evening before Vivian's scheduled induction, Dom sat across from her at dinner, raising a toast to their future. "To our child," he said, eyes revealing nothing. "To our family," Vivian replied, unaware of the machinery already in motion around her. Dom smiled, thinking not of family, but of justice, cold, meticulous, and inescapable. Chapter 3. The Cradle Scheme. Vivian's labor began unexpectedly 2 days before her scheduled induction. Dom received her panic call while in a board meeting, one he'd strategically arranged to establish an alibi. "Meet me at the hospital," she gasped between contractions. "Parker is driving me." Of course he was. Dom maintained his concerned husband facade. "I'm leaving now. Tell Reynolds thank you." Dom arrived at Boston Memorial 30 minutes later, having quickly activated the final preparations of his plan. As expected, Reynolds had already disappeared, maintaining their pretense of a doctor-patient relationship rather than lovers conspiring to steal his legacy. The maternity ward welcomed Dom with practiced efficiency. He carried a bag of Vivian's belongings, including the digital photo frame nanny cam, which he personally placed on the windowsill for good luck. No one questioned it. "Mrs. Frost is progressing rapidly," Melissa Dawson informed him with professional detachment, though her eyes conveyed their secret understanding. "Dr. Nelson is attending, but we have several high-risk deliveries tonight. It might get chaotic." Dom nodded, recognizing the prearranged signal. Tonight would indeed become chaotic, but not by chance. Hours passed in the sterile hospital room, with Vivian alternating between pain and drug-induced haze. Dom played his role perfectly, the concerned husband wiping her brow, advocating with staff, making appropriate calls to family and friends to announce the imminent arrival. At 3:17 a.m., Vivian delivered a healthy 8-pound boy with a strong set of lungs and a shock of dark hair. Dom stared at the child, searching for his own features but seeing only a stranger's face. The paternity test would confirm what he already knew, but tonight's events would make that evidence redundant. While Vivian slept, exhausted from delivery, Dom stepped into the hallway, ostensibly for coffee. Instead, he ducked into an empty consultation room and accessed the nanny cam feed on his encrypted phone. Everything was captured in perfect high-definition detail. At 4:35 a.m., during a shift change, and precisely when hospital security cameras experienced a technical glitch arranged by Theo's contacts, Melissa Dawson entered Vivian's room with another nurse, Courtney Walsh. "Room 307 ready?" Melissa asked, checking that Vivian was still sedated. "Ready. The Calloway baby's condition is worsening. Poor thing probably won't make it through the week," Courtney replied, referring to a severely ill newborn down the hall. Born to a wealthy family with influential connections, exactly as Dom had researched. What happened next played out exactly as Dom had orchestrated. Melissa carefully lifted Dom's son, biologically Reynolds' child, from the bassinet. Courtney wheeled in another bassinet containing the sickly Calloway baby, who shared similar coloring but bore the unmistakable signs of a congenital disorder. "A little tragedy for the rich man," Melissa muttered as they completed the switch. "Maybe this will teach people like the Frosts that money can't buy everything." The irony of her statement, that she was being paid handsomely for this very act, would become apparent to her soon enough. Courtney looked nervous. "If anyone finds out, no one will," Melissa assured her. "The charts are switched in the system. The Calloways get a healthy son, and the Frosts get what fate decides." She didn't mention the envelope of cash in her locker or the promised position at Dom's fictional foundation. Dom watched the entire exchange, his expression unchanged. Phase 1 was complete. The women left, unaware their conversation and actions were permanently recorded from multiple angles. When Vivian woke hours later, the hospital was already buzzing with concerned activity. Dr. Nelson entered with a grave expression as Dom held his wife's hand supportively. "Mrs. Frost, Mr. Frost, I'm afraid there's a situation with your son. He's showing symptoms consistent with Zellweger syndrome. We're running tests, but I must prepare you. The prognosis for this condition is poor." Vivian's anguished scream echoed through the maternity ward. Dom embraced her, hiding his face as he whispered soothing words that meant nothing. Over her shoulder, he made eye contact with Melissa Dawson, who stood in the doorway with a clipboard, her expression carefully neutral. The next 48 hours unfolded in a blur of specialists, tests, and Vivian's unraveling emotions. Dom remained steadfast, authorizing experimental treatments and consultations with world-renowned experts, all while knowing the truth. Reynolds appeared as the concerned physician, offering professional support while barely concealing his devastation. Dom watched their subtle exchanges, the brushing of fingers during chart handoffs, the loaded glances when they thought he was distracted. Their dream of a perfect family with his fortune had shattered spectacularly. On the third day, Dom began the endgame. He waited until Melissa's shift ended, following her to the parking garage. She started at his appearance beside her car. "Mr. Frost, I didn't see you there. We need to talk, Nurse Dawson." His voice was soft but carried unmistakable menace. "About my son, my real son." The color drained from her face. "I don't know what. I've arranged a meeting with Hospital Director Green in 20 minutes. The police will be there too." Dom held up his phone, displaying a crystal-clear image of Melissa switching the babies. Along with this footage, Melissa leaned against her car, legs suddenly weak. How doesn't matter," Dom interrupted. "What matters is what happens next." When they entered Director Green's office, Chief Detective Thomas Sullivan was already waiting with 2 officers. Green looked confused and concerned. "Mr. Frost, Nurse Dawson, what's this urgent matter?" Dom connected his phone to the office display, playing the damning footage without preamble. The room fell silent except for Melissa's shaky breathing. When the video ended, Detective Sullivan turned to Melissa. "Ms. Dawson, you're under arrest for kidnapping, child endangerment, and medical fraud." As an officer began reading Miranda rights, Melissa's desperate voice cut through. "Your wife made me do it." Dom feigned shock perfectly. "What are you talking about?" "Vivian Frost paid me $50,000 to switch the babies," Melissa blurted, tears streaming down her face. "She said her lover was the real father and they needed a way out of the marriage without losing her claim to your money. A sick baby would create sympathy during divorce proceedings." Detective Sullivan looked skeptically at Dom. "That's quite an accusation." Dom appeared appropriately stunned. That's impossible." But Director Green was already pulling up hospital records. "Dr. Parker Reynolds has been Mrs. Frost's prenatal physician from the beginning, despite not being on staff in obstetrics. That's unusual." Dom's expression hardened convincingly. "Check Reynolds' whereabouts during the switch, and my wife's phone records with both of them." The cascade of revelations Dom had carefully arranged began tumbling exactly as planned. Within hours, the truth he had orchestrated would come to light, setting in motion consequences that neither Vivian nor Reynolds could escape. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. Chapter 4: Threads Unraveling. The hospital erupted into controlled chaos as Dom's revelation rippled through administration and law enforcement. Director Green ordered an immediate lockdown of the maternity ward while police secured both babies' locations. Dom observed the proceedings with detached calculation, playing the role of the shocked, betrayed husband with precisely calibrated emotion. "I need to see security footage of my wife's visitors," Dom demanded, knowing full well what it would show. "And I want a DNA test. Immediately." Detective Sullivan, a veteran investigator with sharp eyes that missed nothing, studied Dom carefully. "Mr. Frost, perhaps we should discuss this privately." In Sullivan's makeshift office, a repurposed conference room, the detective laid out photographs of Vivian with Reynolds entering and exiting the hospital on multiple occasions over the past months. "Hospital security cameras caught these," Sullivan explained. "Dr. Reynolds used his access badge to bring her through staff entrances." Dom stared at the images, manufactured surprise giving way to convincing anger. "How long have you been investigating?" "We weren't," Sullivan admitted. "Not until an hour ago. But when accusations this serious emerge, we check everything." He hesitated. "There's more. We've seized Nurse Dawson's personal effects. She kept records, text messages, payment confirmations. Your wife and Reynolds have been planning this for months." Dom stood abruptly, pacing with carefully choreographed agitation. "I need to confront her." "Mr. Frost," Sullivan's tone sharpened. "This is now a criminal investigation. You can't. She's still the mother of a child that may be mine." Dom interrupted, his voice breaking strategically. "Let me talk to her before you make arrests. Please." Sullivan's experience told him to refuse, but compassion won out. 5 minutes. With an officer present, Dom found Vivian in the neonatal intensive care unit, staring through glass at the sickly infant she believed was hers. She turned at his approach, tear-streaked and hollow-eyed. "Dom," she whispered, reaching for him. He stepped back, just beyond her grasp. "Is Parker Reynolds the father?" Her face froze in a mask of confusion that might have been convincing to anyone but him. "What? No. How could you even?" Melissa Dawson confessed everything. Dom cut in coldly. The baby switch. The plan for divorce. All of it. Vivian's performance collapsed instantly. Her eyes darted toward exits, calculating escape routes that no longer existed. "Dom, whatever she said, it's not. Stop lying." His controlled fury made the officer behind him shift nervously. "The police have your text messages, Vivian. They have footage of you with Reynolds. They know." Realization dawned in her eyes. Not just that she was caught, but that she'd severely underestimated the man she'd married. "You knew. Before any of this." Dom stepped closer, voice lowering. "You forgot who I am. Where I came from. The men in South Boston who crossed me never made that mistake twice." The threat hung in the air between them as Detective Sullivan entered. "Mrs. Frost, we need you to come with us for questioning." As police led her away, Vivian's mask of refinement finally shattered completely. "You planned this," she screamed back at Dom. "Somehow you made this happen." Dom watched him passively, saying nothing. Let her accusations seem like desperate deflections of a guilty woman. Hours later, Dom sat in Director Green's office as the hospital administrator slid DNA results across his desk. "Express testing confirms it. The healthy baby with the Callaways is your biological son." Dom had anticipated this moment, prepared his reaction, but genuine surprise overtook him. The child was actually his, not Reynolds'? His calculations momentarily faltered before he regained control. It changed nothing about Vivian's betrayal or his course of action. "What happens now?" Dom asked, recalibrating his strategy. "We've informed the Callaways," Green replied. "They're devastated but cooperative. Child Services is involved due to the criminal nature of the switch." Dom nodded, his mind racing through implications and opportunities. "I want custody of my son immediately. There are protocols." "I don't care about protocols," Dom interrupted. "I'm a father. The baby was stolen through a criminal conspiracy. My lawyers will be here within the hour." True to his word, by nightfall, Dom's legal team had secured emergency custody of his biological son. As he entered the Callaways' private room to reclaim his child, Eleanor Callaway, a dignified woman with compassionate eyes, cradled the healthy infant one last time. "We've been calling him Noah," she said softly. "He's a beautiful boy." Dom approached cautiously, a genuine flicker of emotion catching him off guard as he viewed his son, his actual son, for the first time. "Thank you for taking care of him." "Mr. Frost," Eleanor continued, her husband Gregory standing protectively behind her. "We've had him only days, but—" Her voice broke. "But you love him," Dom finished, understanding complicating his planned response. Gregory Callaway spoke up, his voice strained. "Our son, the baby your wife has, his condition is terminal. The doctors give him weeks, maybe months." Dom hadn't anticipated this conversation. These people had lost one child to disease, and now another to circumstances beyond their control. For the first time since discovering Vivian's betrayal, something pierced his calculated veneer. Not quite compassion, but recognition of fellow players caught in a game they never chose. "The Frost Foundation will cover all medical expenses for your son," Dom said impulsively. "The best specialists, experimental treatments, whatever might help." Eleanor's eyes widened. "You would do that? Even after what's happened?" "Your family is as much a victim as mine," Dom replied, surprising himself with the sincerity in his voice. As hospital staff helped Dom prepare to take his son home, Detective Sullivan appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Frost, a word?" In the hallway, Sullivan looked troubled. "Dr. Reynolds is missing. His phone's been turned off, and he emptied his bank accounts this morning." Dom feigned concern while inwardly smiling. Of course Reynolds had run. Dom had ensured it by having Theo leave very specific threats of the doctor's home. "Find him," Dom said firmly. "He needs to answer for this." Sullivan studied Dom with renewed suspicion. "That's the thing, Mr. Frost. The timing is curious. Reynolds disappeared before we had any evidence linking him to the conspiracy, almost as if he was warned. Dom met the detective's gaze evenly. Perhaps guilty men can sense when their time is up, Detective. Sullivan didn't look convinced. Perhaps. Or perhaps someone orchestrated more than we realize. He handed Dom his card. Call me if you hear from him. Dom took the card, nodding respectfully while recognizing a worthy adversary. Sullivan was smart enough to sense deeper currents, but not yet equipped to navigate them. That night, Dom brought his son home to an emptiness that echoed through the mansion. The nursery, designed for Vivian's fantasy future, now seemed like a monument to betrayal. Instead, Dom placed the baby's hospital-issued bassinet in his own bedroom. Looking down at the sleeping infant, Dom felt something shift inside him, not softening but refocusing. This child was his blood, his legacy, and protecting what was his had always been Dom's primary directive. His phone vibrated with a text from Theo. Package secured. Proceeding to location B. Dom smiled grimly. Reynolds hadn't actually fled. He'd been taken, part of a parallel plan Dom had initiated the moment Melissa implicated the doctor. While police searched airports and train stations, Reynolds was being transported to a remote property Dom owned through untraceable shell companies. Dom gently touched his son's tiny hand. I think we'll keep the name Noah, he whispered. Noah Dominic Frost. A new beginning. Outside the window, lightning flashed across the Boston skyline, illuminating a city unaware that its most powerful resident had only begun to exact his retribution. Chapter 5. Calculated Consequences. Vivian Frost sat in the sterile interview room at Boston Police Headquarters, her designer outfit incongruous against the institutional surroundings. Across from her, Detective Sullivan placed a digital recorder on the table. Mrs. Frost, this conversation is being recorded. You've waived your right to an attorney for this preliminary discussion. Is that correct? Vivian nodded, her composure regained after the initial shock. I have nothing to hide, Detective. Sullivan's expression remained neutral. Then perhaps you can explain these. He slid printouts of text messages across the table. Exchanges between her and Reynolds discussing the baby switch, payment to Melissa, and plans for divorce once the sympathy factor was established. Vivian's carefully reconstructed facade cracked again. These must be fabricated. They match records from your phone provider, Mrs. Frost. And Nurse Dawson has provided her bank statements showing transfers from an offshore account traced back to you. What Vivian couldn't know was that Dom had spent months creating this digital evidence. Fabricated messages indistinguishable from genuine communication, financial transactions routed through accounts opened with stolen identities but linked just enough to create suspicion. As realization dawned that she was thoroughly trapped, Vivian changed tactics. Dom set this up. He's framing me because he discovered my affair with Parker. Sullivan leaned back. An affair you just denied having. I panicked, she admitted. Yes, Parker and I were involved. But this conspiracy? The baby switch? That's insane. Dom is the one who installed cameras everywhere. He's obsessive controlling. Yet the footage clearly shows Nurse Dawson switching the babies, not your husband. Because he paid her more. Vivian's composure disintegrated completely. You don't know what Dom is capable of. He came from nothing. The things he did to build his company. She leaned forward desperately. Investigate him. His past. There are bodies buried, Detective. Literal bodies. Sullivan studied her clinically. We'll investigate all angles, Mrs. Frost. But right now, the evidence against you is substantial. As Vivian was processed for formal charges, conspiracy, child endangerment, and fraud, Dom was meeting with his attorneys in his home office. Noah sleeping peacefully in a bassinet beside him. The preliminary hearing is set for next week, explained Lana Reeves, his chief counsel. Given the evidence, bail will likely be denied. Dom nodded, seemingly distracted by his son's peaceful breathing. There's something else, Lana continued hesitantly. Vivian is making accusations against you. Claims you orchestrated the entire situation. Of course she is, Dom replied calmly. She's desperate. Still, Sullivan seems interested in her claims. He's requested your whereabouts during key periods. Dom smiled thinly. I was in board meetings, community events, all documented and witnessed. Provide everything he needs. After Lana left, Dom received another update from Theo. Guest comfortable at Northern Property. Awaiting instructions. Dom's Northern Property was a modernized hunting lodge on 50 isolated acres in rural Maine, purchased through a complex network of shell corporations. It was there that Reynolds now found himself, not bound or explicitly captive, but effectively trapped nonetheless, with Theo's associates ensuring he couldn't leave. Meanwhile, a parallel drama unfolded at Boston Memorial as the Callaway baby's condition deteriorated rapidly. Dom arranged for world-class specialists to fly in, partly to fulfill his promise, but equally to maintain his public image as a grieving yet magnanimous figure. 3 days after Vivian's arrest, Boston's elite gathered for a charity gala Dom had long planned to attend. Rather than cancel, he appeared briefly with Noah, now cared for by a rigorously vetted nanny. The room hushed as he entered, conversations shifting to dramatic whispers. I considered staying home, Dom addressed the crowd, but causes like children's cancer research transcend personal tragedy. He pledged $10 million to the foundation, earning tearful applause. Afterward, Agnes Harrington, Boston's most influential socialite, approached him. Dominic, what extraordinary grace you've shown through this ordeal. Thank you, Agnes. Though I fear the worst is yet to come. The Callaway child's prognosis is grim. Agnes looked confused, but I spoke with Eleanor yesterday. Their baby passed away last night. Dom feigned shock. What? I'd arranged specialists to arrive tomorrow. It was very sudden, Agnes explained. Eleanor said they're grateful for your efforts nonetheless. Dom excused himself, processing this unexpected development. He hadn't arranged the child's death, but its timing created both opportunities and complications. He immediately called Lana. The situation has changed, he explained. We need to modify our strategy. The death of the Callaway infant transformed the legal landscape. Would have been child endangerment charges against Vivian, Melissa, and the absent Reynolds now escalated to potential homicide charges. District Attorney William Porter, ambitious and sensing career-making headlines, personally took over the case. Dom's public response was carefully calibrated grief and outrage. He visited the Callaways, cameras capturing his arrival with arrangements for the funeral he insisted on funding. Eleanor Callaway, genuine in her mourning, embraced him in a moment that made front pages, two parents united by tragedy. Behind closed doors, Dom's focus remained absolute. He monitored Sullivan's investigation through sources in the department, noting the detective's growing interest in inconsistencies. Sullivan had begun questioning Dom's former business associates, digging into his South Boston connections. Most concerning was Sullivan's request to interview Autumn Rios, Dom's chief of staff who knew more about his daily operations than anyone. Dom arranged to meet her the night before her scheduled interview. Sullivan will ask about my activities the week before Noah's birth, Dom explained as they sat in his study. About surveillance equipment purchases, my meetings with Melissa Dawson. Autumn, loyal since Dom hired her 15 years earlier, didn't hesitate. What do you need me to say? Not say. Show. He handed her a tablet containing an alternate calendar, meticulously crafted to place him nowhere near the conspirators during crucial periods. Your records should match these exactly. Is he getting close? Autumn asked. Close enough to warrant caution, Dom admitted. Sullivan is smarter than I anticipated. After Autumn left, Dom called Theo. It's time for Phase 2. Prepare Reynolds. In Maine, Reynolds had spent 5 days in luxurious isolation, informed only that his protection was necessary while the situation stabilized. When Theo entered with his satellite phone, Reynolds grabbed it desperately. You can make one call, Theo explained, to help your case. What case? I haven't been charged with anything. Reynolds protested. The Callaway baby died last night, Theo informed him flatly. DA's seeking homicide charges against everyone involved in the switch, including you. Reynolds collapsed into a chair, face ashen. My God, I never wanted It was Vivian's idea. Then perhaps you should tell the authorities that Theo suggested, offering the phone. One call. Reynolds' fingers trembled as he dialed Detective Sullivan's direct line, the number Theo had conveniently provided. The conversation that followed was exactly what Dom had orchestrated. Reynolds, panicked and seeking leniency, confessed everything while portraying himself as manipulated by Vivian's ambitions. She convinced me the baby wasn't even Dom's, Reynolds explained desperately. Said once she had leverage through a sick child, we'd take half his fortune and disappear. Sullivan's voice hardened. Where are you now, Dr. Reynolds? I can't say. I'm afraid for my life. Vivian has connections. Turn yourself in, Reynolds. It's your only option. After the call ended, Theo reclaimed the phone. We'll arrange your surrender. With protection. Reynolds nodded miserably, unaware he'd just performed his role perfectly in Dom's grand design. That night, Dom sat beside Noah's crib in the nursery he had completely redesigned, all traces of Vivian's influence removed. His son gripped his finger with surprising strength, eyes focusing with newfound recognition. For a fleeting moment, Dom considered alternative paths, forgiveness, moving forward without complete destruction of those who'd betrayed him. The thought vanished as quickly as it formed. In the world Dom inhabited, mercy was merely weakness by another name. Those who threatened what was his would face consequences to their fullest measure. He kissed his son's forehead gently. Sleep well, Noah. Tomorrow, justice continues. Chapter 6. Courtroom Crucible. The Boston County Courthouse swarmed with media when Reynolds surrendered himself to authorities. Dom watched the coverage from his home office, noting how Reynolds' appearance had been carefully managed by Theo. Unshaven, haunted, a man tormented by conscience rather than merely caught in his crimes. Detective Sullivan supervised the surrender personally, his expression tight with suspicion as he studied the disheveled doctor. Convenient timing, Dr. Reynolds. Reynolds avoided his gaze. I couldn't live with myself after hearing about the baby. The arraignment proceeded with unprecedented speed, driven by Porter's political ambitions and public outrage. Reynolds, Vivian, and Melissa Dawson appeared before Judge Diana Montgomery, a stern jurist known for her uncompromising stance on crimes involving children. Dom attended, strategically seated where Vivian could see him but not speak to him. She entered in handcuffs, the orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to her former elegance. Her eyes locked on Dom with pure hatred, confirming his resolve. The Commonwealth charges the defendants with conspiracy, criminal negligence resulting in death, and fraud, Porter announced. Given the severity, we request all defendants be held without bail. Reynolds' attorney, provided by Dom through untraceable channels, offered unexpected cooperation. Your Honor, Dr. Reynolds is prepared to testify against his co-conspirators in exchange for consideration. Vivian's outburst was immediate and damning. You coward! It was your idea as much as mine. Judge Montgomery's gavel crashed down. Mrs. Frost, control yourself or be removed. The hearing concluded with all three defendants remanded without bail. As they were led away, Vivian lunged toward Dom, screaming accusations that echoed through the courtroom. He set us all up. He knew everything. Outside, reporters surrounded Dom, who projected dignified grief. I only want justice for the Calloway family and for my son, who nearly became another victim. Sullivan watched from the courthouse steps, his expression calculating as Dom navigated the media scrum with practiced precision. That afternoon, Dom received an unexpected call from Sullivan requesting a meeting, alone, at the detective's office rather than Dom's home or company. The unusual request triggered Dom's well-honed survival instincts. Detective, Dom acknowledged, entering Sullivan's cluttered office. I'm not sure what requires such urgency. Sullivan gestured to a chair across from his desk. Evidence that doesn't add up, Mr. Frost. He spread photographs across the desk, surveillance images showing Theo meeting with people connected to Reynolds' surrender, financial records tracing partial connections between shell companies. You've been investigating me, Dom observed calmly. I've been investigating everyone, Sullivan corrected. And I keep finding your fingerprints just outside the frame. Dom maintained his composure. I'm a public figure with extensive connections. Finding links to me in Boston is hardly surprising. Links, sure, but patterns. Sullivan leaned forward. Nurse Dawson's brother suddenly receives a scholarship from a foundation you fund. The security company that experienced glitches during the baby switch is owned by a subsidiary of one of your holding companies. I own interests in hundreds of businesses, Dom countered. As for scholarships, my foundations help thousands of students annually. Sullivan's expression remained skeptical. Then there's Theodore Simmons, your oldest friend, with an interesting history in South Boston. Recently seen with men who then helped Reynolds hide before his dramatic surrender. Dom's expression hardened slightly. Are you accusing me of something, detective? I'm trying to understand what happened. Because right now, I see a man who discovered his wife's affair and orchestrated an elaborate trap, rather than simply divorcing her. That's absurd, Dom scoffed. Why would I endanger innocent children? Sullivan studied him carefully. Because you're Dominic Frost, the boy who broke Tommy Flanagan's arm in 3 places when he stole your mother's grocery money. The MIT student who systematically destroyed Professor Harmon's reputation after he tried to take credit for your research. The businessman who's left a trail of ruined competitors. Dom remained silent, impressed despite himself with Sullivan's thoroughness. You don't forgive betrayal, Mr. Frost. You never have. Sullivan closed his folder. But proving that is another matter entirely. Then we have nothing more to discuss. Dom stood to leave. One more thing, Sullivan called after him. The Calloway baby's death? Medical examiner found anomalies, inconsistent with his diagnosed condition. Dom paused at the door. Meaning someone might have helped nature along. Sullivan's eyes never left Dom's. But I'm sure that's just another coincidence. The accusation hung in the air, a line even Dom hadn't crossed, though Sullivan couldn't know that. The detective was fishing, trying to provoke a reaction. Be careful with unfounded accusations, detective, Dom replied coldly, especially against a grieving father. As Dom departed, his mind calculated rapidly. Sullivan was dangerous, intelligent, and persistent. But without concrete evidence, the detective remained merely an annoyance rather than a threat. The trial preparation consumed the following weeks. Porter, sensing political opportunity, personally led the prosecution. Reynolds had formally turned state's evidence, providing detailed testimony about the conspiracy in exchange for reduced charges. Melissa Dawson followed suit, desperate to avoid maximum penalties. Only Vivian maintained her innocence, insisting she'd been framed by Dom. Throughout these proceedings, Dom crafted his public narrative masterfully. He hired a renowned nanny, created a foundation for infant safety in hospitals, and arranged photo opportunities showing him balancing single fatherhood with running his empire. Boston Magazine ran a sympathetic cover story, Dominic Frost, rising from betrayal. Behind this carefully managed facade, Dom finalized the destruction of those who'd betrayed him. Using financial leverage, he ensured Vivian's selected attorney was secretly compromised. Key evidence discovered by the prosecution continued to emerge through channels Dom controlled. 2 days before the trial began, Dom visited the Calloways one final time, bringing Noah to meet them. A gesture both calculated and genuinely complex as he developed unexpected respect for their dignity through loss. We want you to be part of Noah's life, Dom told them, surprising himself with the authenticity of the offer. As his honorary grandparents, Eleanor wiped away tears. We be honored. Gregory, who had remained suspicious of Dom's motives, seemed to finally soften. He has your determination in his eyes. The visit achieved multiple purposes, cementing Dom's public image, providing his son with caring figures in his life, and establishing witnesses who would testify to his character during the upcoming trial. The morning the trial began, Boston woke to shocking headlines. Reynolds had been found dead in his cell, an apparent suicide. His detailed confession, witnessed and notarized, would still be admissible evidence. Sullivan appeared at Dom's home within hours. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Dom met his gaze steadily. A guilty conscience is a terrible burden, detective. His guards report a visitor yesterday, a lawyer from a firm you've used. Sullivan's accusation remained unspoken but clear. Many lawyers in Boston have connections to my companies, Dom replied. I'm sure your investigation will find nothing improper. Sullivan leaned closer. I know what you've done, Frost. I just can't prove it yet. Then all you have is theories, detective. And theories don't hold up in court. As Sullivan left, Dom received confirmation from Theo that the final pieces were in place. Reynolds' death, genuinely self-inflicted after systematic psychological pressure from Dom's operatives, simplified the trial considerably. When court convened, with media filling every available seat, Porter presented a narrative exactly as Dom had designed it. A greedy wife, a morally compromised doctor, and a nurse willing to risk children's lives for financial gain. The evidence mounted day after day, methodically crushing Vivian's claims of innocence. On the trial's fourth day, Dom took the stand as the prosecution's star witness. Under Porter's careful questioning, he presented the image of a devoted husband blindsided by betrayal. I had no suspicion until I saw the nanny cam footage. Dom testified, his performance flawless. The shock of seeing Nurse Dawson switch my son. I can't describe it. When Vivian's attorney cross-examined him, Dom maintained his composure despite increasingly desperate attempts to break his narrative. Isn't it true you had your wife under surveillance for months? The lawyer demanded. After noticing her strange behavior, I was concerned she might be ill or in trouble, Dom replied smoothly. I never imagined this level of betrayal. By the trial's end, the outcome was inevitable. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Judge Montgomery sentenced Melissa Dawson to 15 years and Vivian to 25 years without possibility of parole. As officers led Vivian away, she locked eyes with Dom one final time. This isn't over, she hissed. The truth will come out. Dom simply watched, his expression revealing nothing as the architects of his son's endangerment disappeared to face the consequences he had meticulously arranged. Outside the courthouse, Dom faced the assembled media, Noah in his arms, a powerful image of fatherhood transcending tragedy. Justice has been served, he stated simply. Now my son and I can begin our future. Only Sullivan, watching from the periphery, recognized the cold satisfaction behind Dom's carefully composed expression. Their eyes met briefly across the crowd, adversaries recognizing each other's measure. The detective's phone buzzed with a message. His transfer request to federal law enforcement had been approved. He would continue his investigation of Dominic Frost from a position with greater resources and jurisdiction, a development Dom hadn't anticipated. As cameras flashed around father and son, two men set in motion competing long games that would eventually collide. But for now, Dom had achieved his immediate objective: retribution against those who had betrayed him and the preservation of his legacy through the son who now bore his name alone. Chapter 7. Shadows Advancing. 5 years passed with the calculated precision that defined Dom's existence. Noah grew into a precocious, serious child with his father's analytical mind and piercing gaze. Dom had transformed their household into a fortress of stability. Elite private tutors, carefully vetted staff, and a daily routine designed to nurture both intellectual and physical excellence. On Noah's 5th birthday, Dom hosted a modest celebration at their Beacon Hill mansion. The guest list was deliberately limited to the Callaways, who had indeed become surrogate grandparents, key business associates with children Noah's age, and staff who had proven their loyalty. He's remarkably like you, Gregory Calloway observed as they watched Noah methodically construct an elaborate structure from building blocks. The concentration, the planning. Dom nodded with carefully measured pride. He'll be ready for Westridge Academy next fall, their advanced program. What remained unspoken was how thoroughly Dom had eliminated Vivian from their lives. Her name was never mentioned. Photos had been removed. Noah had no memory of a mother. Only Ms. Langley, his primary caretaker, and the various specialists who guided his development. After the celebration, as Dom worked in his study, Bernard delivered an unmarked envelope that had been hand-delivered to the security desk. Inside was a single newspaper clipping, an obituary for Melissa Dawson, who had died in prison from natural causes. A note in distinctive handwriting read simply, "Coincidences mounting. T.S." Dom recognized Sullivan's initials immediately. In the years since the trial, the detective had transitioned to the FBI's Boston field office, where he continued assembling pieces of Dom's orchestration. This message confirmed Sullivan remained fixed on exposing the truth and was getting closer. Dom's immediate response was to accelerate contingency plans. He called Theo, now officially employed as Frost Innovations' security consultant. "Sullivan's making noise again," Dom explained. "We need to implement Protocol Horizon." Protocol Horizon involved systematically eliminating vulnerable connections, reassigning key personnel who knew fragments of Dom's actions, destroying lingering evidence, and creating additional layers of separation between Dom and any questionable activities. That evening, after Noah was asleep, Dom accessed a secure server containing the original nanny cam footage, unaltered, showing the baby switch exactly as it had occurred, but without Melissa's damning statements about Vivian's involvement. This authentic recording remained his insurance policy against future complications. The following morning brought news that the Board of Corrections had denied Vivian's latest appeal. 5 years into her sentence, she had exhausted most legal options. The system Dom had carefully influenced continued working as designed. Dom maintained periodic surveillance of Vivian through carefully placed sources within the women's correctional facility. Reports indicated she had adapted to prison life with unexpected resilience, earning privileges through model behavior while maintaining her claims of innocence to anyone who would listen. What concerned Dom was her recent correspondence with investigative journalist Mara Callahan, who specialized in wrongful convictions. He'd intercepted several letters through his sources, noting Vivian's methodical compilation of inconsistencies in the case against her. Dom's contingency planning had always accounted for potential threats from Vivian, but her persistence exceeded his projections. Most would have broken under the circumstances he'd created. Instead, she appeared to be gathering allies and evidence with patient determination that mirrored his own methods. While monitoring these developments, Dom received a call from Eleanor Calloway that triggered rare, genuine emotion. "Gregory's gone, Dom," she sobbed. "Heart attack this morning." Dom's relationship with the Calloways had evolved beyond strategic utility. Gregory's steadfast dignity and Eleanor's warmth had penetrated defenses Dom rarely lowered. Noah genuinely loved them, and Dom had come to value their presence in his son's life. "I'm coming over," Dom replied immediately. "Is there anything you need?" At the Calloway home, Dom found Eleanor surrounded by relatives, including her nephew Miles, a law student Dom had met at previous family gatherings. While Eleanor greeted him with a tearful embrace, Miles observed their interaction with evident suspicion. Later, as Dom prepared to leave, Miles approached him in the hallway. "Mr. Frost, I've been meaning to talk to you." Dom recognized the confrontational tone immediately. "About? My studies have focused on criminal law. I've been reviewing famous Boston cases." Miles' expression hardened. "Including your wife's conviction." Dom maintained neutral engagement. "A difficult time for everyone involved. I found some troubling inconsistencies," Miles continued. "Records that don't align. Witnesses whose testimony changed dramatically between initial interviews and trial." Dom studied the young man carefully. "Grief can produce unusual perspectives, Miles. Perhaps this isn't the best time. Or perhaps it's exactly the right time," Miles interrupted. "Before my aunt forms any lasting financial or guardianship arrangements with you regarding Noah." The implied threat was clear. Another front had opened in the ongoing battle to protect the life Dom had reconstructed. "Your concerns are misplaced," Dom replied coolly. "But I understand they come from care for your aunt. I respect that." Miles held his gaze. "I'll be watching you, Mr. Frost." As Dom left, he called Autumn. "I need everything on Miles Calloway. Every detail, every vulnerability." 3 days later, Dom received another unmarked envelope, this time containing a thumb drive. Accessing it through a secure, isolated system revealed a compiled dossier of evidence Sullivan had been gathering. Financial trails connecting Dom to key witnesses, timestamped security footage showing Dom near the hospital when he claimed to be elsewhere, and fragmentary records of communications with Melissa Dawson before the baby switch. No note accompanied the drive, but the message was clear. Sullivan was giving Dom an opportunity to come forward voluntarily before the case broke open. That night, Dom visited his cabin in the Berkshires, ostensibly for a weekend with Noah, but primarily to access physical evidence stored in a hidden safe. The original contracts with Melissa, recordings of his meetings with Reynolds, and other compromising materials remained secure as insurance against betrayal by his own operatives. Upon returning to Boston, Dom was surprised to find Autumn waiting at his home office, her expression unusually troubled. "There's a problem," she began without preamble. "Miles Calloway has been meeting with Detective Sullivan." Dom absorbed this development silently. The convergence of threats was accelerating faster than anticipated. "There's more," Autumn continued. "Eleanor's been contacted by Mara Callahan, the journalist communicating with Vivian. She's requesting an interview about inconsistencies in the Frost case." Dom's mind calculated rapidly, seeing the emerging pattern. Sullivan was orchestrating a coordinated effort, approaching the case from multiple angles to overcome Dom's careful compartmentalization. "We need to neutralize these threats individually," Dom decided, starting with Miles. The plan Dom implemented was characteristically multifaceted. For Miles, Dom arranged a prestigious internship offer from an international law firm, one that would require immediate relocation to London. The opportunity appeared legitimate, though the firm's managing partner owed Dom significant favors. For Mara Callahan, the approach was more direct. Dom arranged a private meeting at her newspaper's offices. "Ms. Callahan," Dom began once they were alone, "I understand you're investigating my family's tragedy." Callahan, a sharp-featured woman with uncompromising eyes, nodded. "I've found concerning patterns in the case against your ex-wife." "I'm not here to dissuade you," Dom surprised her by saying, "only to provide context." He slid a folder across the table containing documents that appeared to implicate Vivian in earlier, unrelated ethical breaches during her pharmaceutical career. Fabricated evidence Dom had prepared years earlier but never needed to deploy. "These never came up during the trial," Dom explained. "I wanted to protect what remained of her reputation. But if you're determined to reopen old wounds, you should have all relevant information." Callahan studied the documents skeptically. "Why give these to me now?" "Because Noah deserves protection from renewed media speculation," Dom replied with calculated sincerity. "He's an innocent child who's suffered enough." The invocation of Noah's well-being was deliberate. Dom had researched Callahan thoroughly, knowing her own difficult childhood would make this appeal particularly effective. As Dom left the newspaper offices, he received a text from Bernard. "Sullivan on approach to residence." Dom redirected his driver immediately. If Sullivan was making an official move, being present was essential. He arrived to find Sullivan at his front gate, credentials displayed for the security team. "This is becoming harassment, Agent Sullivan," Dom called as he emerged from his vehicle. Sullivan turned, unsurprised by Dom's timely appearance. "Just following evidence, Mr. Frost. Something that's long overdue in your case. My home is not a crime scene. If you have questions, contact my attorneys." Sullivan smiled thinly. "Actually, I'm here about Melissa Dawson's death. Preliminary toxicology suggests unusual compounds in her system, the kind developed by certain biotech companies." The implication was clear and dangerous. While Dom had indeed arranged Melissa's elimination to prevent potential cooperation with Sullivan, the methodology had been designed specifically to appear natural. "That's a serious accusation," Dom replied coldly. "Not an accusation. Yet." Sullivan handed Dom an official envelope. "But sufficient cause for these warrants. We'll be examining financial records for all Frost companies and subsidiaries for the past 6 years." As Sullivan departed, Dom recognized the escalation for what it was. The detective had secured enough leverage to begin dismantling Dom's carefully constructed defenses. That night, as Noah slept under Bernard's watchful protection, Dom implemented his most comprehensive contingency plan. Secure communications activated dormant resources across his network, offshore accounts, alternate identities, and escape protocols established years earlier. By morning, key evidence had been relocated, digital trails obscured, and loyal operatives positioned to create diversions if needed. Dom had never expected to require such extreme measures, but Sullivan's persistence had forced his hand. "Are we in danger, Father?" Noah asked unexpectedly over breakfast, his perceptiveness unsettling as always. Dom considered his answer carefully. "Some people don't understand what's necessary to protect what matters, Noah. But I prepared for every possibility." "Because of Mother?" Noah's question froze Dom momentarily. They never discussed Vivian. "What do you know about your mother?" Dom asked carefully. Noah's expression remained serious beyond his years. "I heard Eleanor talking to Miles. They said she might be innocent." Dom set down his coffee, meeting his son's gaze directly. "Sometimes people believe what's comfortable rather than what's true. Your mother made choices that put you in danger. Everything I've done has been to protect you from those consequences." Noah considered this with the same analytical intensity Dom recognized from his own reflection. "Will they take me away from you?" "Never," Dom promised, his voice hardening with absolute conviction. "I won't allow that to happen." As Noah left for his morning lessons, Dom received an encrypted message from Theo, witness secured. Proceeding as instructed. The witness was former nurse Courtney Walsh, who had assisted Melissa with the baby switch. After serving a minor sentence for her peripheral role, she had disappeared into a new identity Dom had arranged. Now, with Sullivan closing in, she would become the linchpin of Dom's counter-strategy, the final sacrifice in a chess game approaching its endgame. Chapter 8. Converging Fates. The federal investigation into Frost Innovations accelerated with unexpected intensity. Teams of forensic accountants descended on Dom's corporate headquarters, while FBI agents executed search warrants at multiple properties. The media frenzy that followed sent company stock plummeting despite Dom's public assurances. "This is a fishing expedition driven by one agent's obsession," Dom stated during a hastily arranged press conference. "Frost Innovations will cooperate fully while continuing to develop life-saving technologies." Behind this composed facade, Dom implemented increasingly aggressive countermeasures. Using political connections cultivated over decades, he initiated an inspector general review of Sullivan's investigation, alleging personal vendetta and procedural violations. Simultaneously, Dom accelerated what he called protocol severance, the final elimination of connections between himself and any potentially incriminating actions. Key personnel received generous international reassignments. Electronic records underwent systematic corruption through precisely engineered technical failures. Most crucially, Dom arranged for Noah's security and contingency planning. If the situation deteriorated beyond recovery, Bernard had instructions to activate Ghost Protocol, relocating Noah to a prepared facility in Switzerland where Dom would eventually join him through channels untraceable to their existing identities. These preparations were nearly complete when Dom received news that changed everything. Vivian had been granted an expedited appeal hearing based on newly discovered evidence. The development sent Dom into rare, genuine distress. His sources within the prison system had failed to detect this legal maneuver. Further investigation revealed that Miles Calloway, despite accepting the London position, had continued working with Sullivan remotely, providing legal assistance to Vivian's new defense team. Most concerning was the nature of the new evidence. Courtney Walsh had come forward with a revised statement claiming she had been coerced into participating in both the baby switch and subsequent testimony. Dom immediately contacted Theo, who confirmed the alarming development. Walsh disappeared 3 days ago. Contact protocols failed. This represented the first major failure of Dom's control systems. Someone, likely Sullivan, had reached Walsh before Theo's team could secure her. That evening, Dom sat alone in his study, methodically reviewing contingency options while classical music masked the conversation from potential surveillance. Noah entered quietly, his expression serious. "You're worried," Noah observed with disconcerting perception. "About the police." Dom considered deflecting, but chose honesty within limits. I'm concerned about people who don't understand what I've had to do to protect us. Noah nodded with eerie comprehension. The man who visits Eleanor, Agent Sullivan. He watches our house sometimes. Dom concealed his surprise at Noah's observation. You've seen him? From my window. He sits in different cars, but always watches the same way. Noah stepped closer. Are we going away? Bernard packed emergency bags. The question forced Dom to confront the reality he'd been avoiding. The life he'd built for Noah was unraveling despite all precautions. If necessary, yes, but not yet. Noah processed this with the same analytical calmness Dom had cultivated in him. Because of Mother? Partially, Dom acknowledged. Some people believe she should be released. Would she take me away from you? The question struck Dom with unexpected force. Despite his preparations, he hadn't fully considered how Noah would process these developments. The boy had never known his mother, yet clearly understood more than Dom had realized. I won't let that happen, Dom assured him, placing hands on his son's shoulders. No matter what. After Noah returned to bed, Dom received an encrypted call from Autumn. Sullivan's team accessed the sealed hospital records. They found discrepancies in the DNA testing. This development was potentially catastrophic. Dom had never altered the DNA results showing Noah was his biological son. That truth had been genuine. But he had ensured other genetic markers were modified to prevent comparison with the limited samples from the deceased Calloway baby. How soon until the appeal hearing? Dom asked. 3 days, Autumn replied. But there's more. Eleanor Calloway has agreed to testify for Vivian. The betrayal, though Eleanor wouldn't see it that way, cut unexpectedly deep. Dom had genuinely valued the relationship she had formed with Noah, seeing it as beneficial beyond strategic considerations. Arrange a meeting with Eleanor. Tomorrow morning. The following day, Dom arrived at Eleanor's home to find her reluctant but willing to speak. She looked older, grief having accelerated time's effects since Gregory's death. I didn't want it to come to this, she began as they sat in her sunroom. But Miles showed me evidence, Dom. Things that can't be explained away. Dom maintained calm engagement. Evidence can be misleading, especially when presented selectively. Walsh has sworn that the babies were switched on your instructions. Eleanor continued. That you knew about Vivian's affair and orchestrated everything as revenge. And you believe this convicted criminal over me? Dom asked softly. After everything we've shared? Eleanor's expression revealed her conflicted emotions. I don't know what to believe anymore. But if there's any chance Vivian is innocent. And what about Noah? Dom interrupted, his voice hardening slightly. Have you considered what this will do to him? Having his life torn apart, his mother suddenly returned from prison, claiming his father is a monster? The appeal to Noah's well-being struck home. Eleanor's resolve visibly wavered. I don't want to hurt Noah. You know how much I love him. Then don't testify, Dom urged. At least wait until all evidence is properly examined, not just Walsh's convenient news story. As Dom left, he recognized Eleanor's hesitation as temporary at best. Sullivan had already convinced her of Dom's guilt. She was merely struggling with the consequences for Noah. That afternoon, the situation escalated dramatically. Dom received an urgent call from Bernard while in a board meeting. Sir, federal agents are at the mansion with a court order regarding Noah. Dom maintained his composure despite the thunderbolt of fear this news triggered. What kind of order? Temporary custody evaluation. They're demanding access to Noah for interview by child welfare specialists. Initiate blackout protocol. Dom ordered immediately. No one accesses Noah without me present. I'm on my way. By the time Dom arrived home, a tense standoff had developed. Sullivan stood in Dom's foyer alongside 2 agents and a woman identified as a court-appointed child psychologist. Bernard's security staff had secured Noah in the East Wing, politely but firmly refusing access. This is harassment, Sullivan, Dom stated coldly as he entered. My son is not a pawn in your vendetta. Sullivan handed Dom court documents. This isn't optional, Frost. The court has concerns about Noah's well-being given new evidence in your wife's case. Dom scanned the order, his mind racing through options. None of them good. Direct defiance would only strengthen Sullivan's position. I'll allow the interview, Dom finally conceded, but I'll be present along with my attorney. The order specifies Noah should be interviewed alone, the psychologist interjected. Then we can resolve this before a judge, Dom countered. After an emergency hearing that will take days to arrange. Or we can proceed now, with me present but not interfering. Sullivan recognized the impasse. Fine, but the interview happens now. The session that followed in Noah's study was a psychological chess match. The court psychologist asked carefully structured questions about Noah's home life, his understanding of his mother, and whether he ever felt afraid. Noah's responses were measured and precise, displaying the emotional control and situational awareness Dom had cultivated in him. He spoke of his father with genuine admiration, expressed curiosity but no distress about his mother's absence, and demonstrated emotional health that contradicted the narrative Sullivan was building. When asked directly if he knew why his mother was in prison, Noah's response was devastatingly simple. Because she tried to swap me with a sick baby. Father never speaks badly about her, but I found the news articles myself. The psychologist appeared taken aback by Noah's composure and awareness. When Sullivan attempted to interject additional questions, Noah turned to him with unsettling directness. You watch our house sometimes. From different cars. Why do you want to take me away from my father? Sullivan's momentary surprise confirmed the accuracy of Noah's observation. The interview concluded shortly thereafter, with the psychologist clearly documenting Noah's apparent well-being and preference to remain with his father. As the federal team departed, Sullivan lingered momentarily. Impressive performance, Frost. The boy's been well-trained. Or perhaps he simply knows what's true, Dom replied evenly. Your crusade is harming him far more than I ever could. Sullivan's expression hardened. We found Walsh. Her full testimony will be devastating. This isn't over. After they left, Dom implemented the next phase of contingency planning. Bernard and Theo began preparing for potential emergency departure, while Autumn accelerated legal countermeasures through Dom's extensive network. That evening, Eleanor called unexpectedly. Miles showed me the interview recording, she said, her voice strained. Noah seems so certain. Dom recognized the opportunity. Because he knows what happened, Eleanor. I've never lied to him. Only sheltered him from details he wasn't ready to understand. I can't testify against you, she admitted. Not after seeing him. Not without being absolutely certain. Dom felt momentary relief, though he recognized the reprieve might be temporary. Noah needs stability right now. He needs the people he trusts. After the call, Dom found Noah in the mansion's library, reading advanced texts on molecular biology, his latest fascination. The boy looked up as Dom entered. You did well today, Dom acknowledged, sitting beside him. Noah closed his book thoughtfully. They want to give me back to Mother. Some people think that would be best, Dom confirmed, never condescending to Noah's intelligence. But she tried to hurt me, Noah stated with conviction that unsettled even Dom. I remember the hospital. Not clearly, but feelings. Being taken from somewhere safe to somewhere wrong. Dom studied his son with new understanding. He'd never discussed these earliest memories, assuming Noah retained nothing from his first days of life. What else do you remember? A woman talking about hurting a rich man? Noah continued, his gaze distant. And then you finding me. Making things right. These fragments, whether genuine memory or constructed from things Noah had overheard, aligned too perfectly with Dom's narrative. For the first time, Dom questioned whether his orchestration of events had damaged something fundamental in his son's development. Noah, Dom began carefully, sometimes when bad things happen, our memories can be affected by what we learn later. Noah looked at him with disconcerting clarity. You think I'm remembering what I read? Not what happened. It's possible, Dom acknowledged. Would you tell me if Mother was innocent? Noah asked directly. The question presented Dom with a moral crossroads he'd never anticipated. The absolute truth would destroy Noah's trust and stability at a critical moment. A complete lie would potentially compound whatever psychological impact his actions had already caused. Your mother made choices that put you at risk, Dom answered carefully. My actions were to protect you. That's the truth that matters. Noah seemed to accept this, though Dom sensed the boy understood more than he revealed. If we have to leave, can I bring my research materials? Of course, Dom promised, struck by how thoroughly Noah had internalized the possibility of their life changing completely. Later that night, as Dom finalized preparations for possible departure, Theo arrived with critical intelligence. Walsh's statement has inconsistencies. Sullivan's rushing it because he knows it won't hold up to extended scrutiny. This offered Dom a strategic opportunity. Rather than fleeing, which would appear as tacit admission of guilt, he could potentially discredit Walsh's testimony through aggressive legal challenge. Prepare for both possibilities, Dom instructed: immediate departure or courtroom confrontation. The following morning brought the final catalyst for Dom's decision. Vivian's attorney filed an emergency motion for temporary custody of Noah pending resolution of the appeal. Dom immediately contacted his legal team, led by the formidable Lana Reeves. I want counter-motions filed today. Emphasize Noah's established life, academic progress, and the traumatic impact of separation. The judge assigned to the appeal is Jonathan Mercer, Lana informed him. He has a history of favoring maternal custody. Dom absorbed this setback with characteristic calculation. Then we need to ensure this becomes about evidence, not sentiment. Attack Walsh's credibility specifically. The legal battle that ensued unfolded with breathtaking speed. Dom's team filed motions challenging Walsh's testimony, highlighting her history of plea bargaining and inconsistent statements. Sullivan's team countered with forensic financial evidence, showing patterns consistent with Dom's orchestration. The night before the appeal hearing, Dom received intelligence that Sullivan had located another potential witness, a security guard from Boston Memorial who claimed to have seen Dom meeting with Melissa Dawson before the baby switch. With options narrowing, Dom made his final decision. He found Noah in his bedroom, carefully organizing his belongings as instructed. There's been a change of plan, Dom told him. We're not leaving yet. Tomorrow, I'm going to fight these accusations directly. Noah studied his father carefully. Because running would make you look guilty? Precisely, Dom confirmed, again struck by his son's perception. I've never run from anything, Noah. I won't start now. That night, Dom accessed his most secured files, original evidence he'd preserved as insurance against exactly this scenario. The unaltered nanny cam footage showed the baby switch exactly as it had occurred, but without the manufactured statements implicating Vivian. Additional documentation revealed the full extent of his orchestration. Rather than destroying these materials as caution might dictate, Dom preserved them with instructions to Bernard, a final contingency if events turned against him completely. Noah's future security mattered more than Dom's personal freedom or reputation. As dawn broke on the day of reckoning, Dom prepared himself not just for legal battle, but for the possibility that his carefully constructed world might collapse entirely. Yet beneath this preparation lay an unexpected certainty. Whatever the outcome, he would never regret the actions taken to secure his son's future. Sullivan might prove a worthy adversary. The legal system might temporarily separate them, but Dom's fundamental nature remained unchanged. Those who threatened what was his would face consequences, today, tomorrow, or years in the future when they least expected retribution. The game would continue, with higher stakes but the same ultimate objective, protecting his legacy at any cost. Chapter 9. Unyielding Resolve. The Boston County Courthouse stood imposing against the morning sky as Dom arrived for Vivian's appeal hearing. Media swarmed the entrance, held back by barriers and police. Dom navigated through with practiced composure, projecting confidence despite the precariousness of his position. Inside, the courthouse hummed with tension. Dom nodded to Eleanor, who sat alone in the gallery, her expression conflicted. Sullivan occupied a front row seat alongside the prosecutorial team, his attention fixed on Dom with predatory focus. When Vivian entered flanked by corrections officers, Dom studied her dispassionately. 5 years of incarceration had hardened her physically and mentally. Gone was the polished socialite. In her place stood a woman forged by survival and sustained by singular purpose. Their eyes met briefly. Mutual recognition of adversaries who understood each other too well. Judge Jonathan Mercer entered, his reputation for thoroughness immediately apparent as he addressed the courtroom. This hearing will determine whether sufficient new evidence exists to warrant a retrial in the matter of Commonwealth versus Frost. I'll remind everyone that the burden remains on the defense to demonstrate substantial change in available evidence. Vivian's attorney, a prominent appellate specialist named Diana Lockhart, presented their case first. With methodical precision, she laid out the newly discovered evidence. Courtney Walsh's revised testimony, financial irregularities suggesting Dom's manipulation, and expert analysis challenging the medical evidence from the original trial. Your Honor, Lockhart concluded, Vivian Frost has served 5 years for crimes orchestrated by her husband as revenge for an affair. The real villain has been hiding behind wealth, influence, and careful manipulation of evidence. When Dom's attorney, Lana Reeves, rose to respond, her strategy was equally calculated. The defense offers a sensational narrative built on the word of Courtney Walsh, a woman who has changed her story multiple times when it served her interests. Mrs. Frost's guilt was established by overwhelming evidence, including her own incriminating statements to multiple witnesses. The legal battle continued through expert testimony and procedural arguments. Dom remained impassive, though internally he calculated probabilities and adjusted strategies as the hearing progressed. When Walsh took the stand, her testimony proved less damaging than anticipated. Her account contained inconsistencies that Lana exploited effectively. The turning point came unexpectedly when Judge Mercer addressed forensic accountant Martin Chun, who had analyzed Dom's financial records. Your report suggests patterns consistent with orchestration, but contains no definitive evidence linking Mr. Frost directly to witness tampering or evidence manipulation. Is that accurate? Chun hesitated. The patterns are highly suggestive, Your Honor, but indirect. We haven't located specific transactions proving bribery or coercion. Mercer's expression revealed nothing, but Dom recognized the significance of this exchange. Without direct evidence, Sullivan's case relied heavily on circumstantial connections that might not meet the legal threshold for overturning a conviction. During a midday recess, Dom stepped into a private conference room where Noah waited with Bernard. The boy looked up from his book, studying his father's expression. Is it going well? Noah asked directly. Dom considered how to respond appropriately to a 5-year-old while respecting his intelligence. The judge seems focused on evidence rather than accusations. That's positive. Noah nodded seriously. If mother comes home, will I have to live with her sometimes? The question cut through Dom's carefully maintained composure. That won't happen, Noah. Under no circumstances. But if a judge orders it, Noah persisted. Dom sat beside his son, meeting his gaze directly. There are rules beyond what judges can decide. I will always ensure you're safe and with me. Always. The afternoon session brought Sullivan himself to the witness stand, where he presented the accumulated evidence of his multi-year investigation. His testimony was compelling and methodical, revealing the full scope of connections he'd established between Dom and key elements of the original case. Agent Sullivan, Judge Mercer interrupted, your investigation is impressive in its thoroughness. However, I'm still not seeing direct evidence of Mr. Frost's alleged orchestration, only patterns suggesting possible involvement. Sullivan leaned forward intently. Your Honor, these patterns are consistent with sophisticated criminal conspiracy. Mr. Frost's expertise in creating untraceable connections remains speculative without corroborating evidence. Mercer interrupted. This court requires facts, not theories, regardless of how compelling. As testimony concluded, Dom received an unexpected message from Bernard. Unknown vehicle monitoring Eleanor's residence. Not law enforcement. The development added a new variable to an already complex situation. Dom immediately dispatched Theo to investigate while focusing on the closing arguments. Lockhart delivered an impassioned plea for justice. Vivian Frost has maintained her innocence from the beginning. The mounting evidence of manipulation demands, at minimum, a new trial with proper examination of Dominic Frost's role in these events. Lana countered with measured precision. The defense offers theories without definitive proof, built on the shifting testimony of convicted conspirators. Mrs. Frost's conviction resulted from overwhelming evidence that remains uncontradicted by credible new information. Judge Mercer adjourned to consider his ruling, scheduling the decision for the following morning. As the courtroom cleared, Sullivan approached Dom directly. "Impressive legal maneuvering," the agent acknowledged. "But this isn't over, Frost." Dom maintained professional detachment. "The legal system requires evidence, Sullivan, not personal vendettas." "I found a security guard who saw you with Dawson before the switch," Sullivan countered. "He's prepared to testify in a new trial." Dom allowed subtle recognition to show. Another conveniently emerging witness with suddenly improved memory? Judge Mercer seems skeptical of such patterns. Their exchange was interrupted by Bernard, who approached with controlled urgency. "Sir, a situation requires your immediate attention." Outside, in Dom's secure vehicle, Bernard revealed the developing crisis. The surveillance at Eleanor's residence is connected to Miles Calloway. He appears to be protecting her from potential threats. Dom processed this information quickly. "What threats?" "Unknown," Bernard admitted. "But Miles has hired private security and installed monitoring equipment. He seems convinced Eleanor is in danger." The implications were immediately clear. Miles suspected Dom might target Eleanor to prevent her potential testimony in a retrial. A logical assumption given his understanding of events, but one that complicated Dom's position further. "Maintain distance surveillance," Dom instructed. "No direct contact or intervention unless absolutely necessary." Returning to his Beacon Hill mansion, Dom found Noah with Ms. Langley in the library, apparently absorbed in his studies but clearly waiting for updates. "The judge will decide tomorrow," Dom explained simply. Noah processed this with his characteristic seriousness. "I heard Bernard talking. Someone is watching Eleanor." Dom again found himself navigating the delicate balance between honesty and appropriate information for Noah's age. Miles is concerned about her safety. Because he thinks he might hurt her, Noah concluded with disconcerting directness. To stop her from helping Mother. The boy's perception continued to unsettle Dom. "Miles doesn't understand our family, Noah, or what I would or wouldn't do." Later that evening, as Noah slept under enhanced security, Dom received critical intelligence from Theo. The security guard Sullivan mentioned had been located by Dom's operatives and questioned. His testimony would indeed be damaging. He had genuinely observed Dom near Melissa Dawson's station during periods Dom had claimed to be elsewhere. This development forced Dom to adjust his strategic calculus. Judge Mercer might deny the appeal based on current evidence, but Sullivan would continue building his case with new witnesses. The security guard's testimony could potentially trigger a separate investigation focused directly on Dom rather than Vivian's conviction. Dom faced the most consequential decision since discovering Vivian's betrayal. Implement Ghost Protocol immediately, disappearing with Noah before legal mechanisms could separate them, or remain and fight through increasingly unfavorable circumstances. The decision crystallized around a fundamental truth Dom had always acknowledged. Noah's well-being superseded all other considerations, including Dom's freedom, reputation, or the empire he'd built. With cold precision, Dom activated final preparations. Autumn received coded instructions to implement financial contingencies that would secure resources regardless of legal outcomes. Bernard coordinated enhanced security protocols while preparing for multiple departure scenarios. Theo ensured transportation options remained viable despite Sullivan's surveillance. At dawn, Dom woke Noah personally. "Today will bring changes," he explained with measured candor. "Whatever happens in court, remember that everything I've done has been to protect you." Noah studied his father with unnerving intensity. "Are we leaving tonight?" Dom hadn't explicitly shared these plans, reinforcing his growing recognition of Noah's observational abilities. "Possibly. Be prepared without being obvious." "I'm always prepared, Father." The courthouse was even more crowded as Dom arrived for Judge Mercer's ruling. Media speculation had reached fever pitch following leaks about the potential breakthrough in Vivian's case. Sullivan sat, with visible confidence, beside the prosecution team. Eleanor had moved closer to Vivian's side of the courtroom, a symbolic shift that communicated her evolving perspective. Judge Mercer entered with the deliberate gravity of a man aware his decision would generate headlines regardless of direction. After preliminary remarks addressing procedural matters, he turned to the substance of his ruling. This court has carefully considered the evidence presented regarding Vivian Frost's appeal. While Agent Sullivan's investigation raises legitimate questions about potential manipulation of witnesses and circumstances, these concerns remain primarily circumstantial rather than definitively proven. Sullivan's expression tightened as Mercer continued. However, the testimony of Courtney Walsh, despite inconsistencies, does introduce sufficient doubt regarding key elements of the original prosecution to warrant further examination. Dom maintained his composed exterior while internally recalculating probabilities and timelines. Therefore, this court grants a limited evidentiary hearing to evaluate the credibility of new witnesses and evidence, specifically regarding Dominic Frost's potential role in orchestrating events. This hearing will determine whether sufficient grounds exist for a full retrial. The courtroom erupted in controlled chaos as Mercer set the evidentiary hearing for 3 weeks hence. Vivian's attorneys celebrated the partial victory, while Sullivan immediately conferred with prosecutors about securing additional witnesses. Dom processed the ruling with characteristic calculation. 3 weeks provided sufficient time to implement an orderly transition rather than abrupt disappearance, transferring business control to trusted proxies, securing assets against potential seizure, and arranging Noah's departure under optimal conditions. As court adjourned, Sullivan approached with barely concealed satisfaction. The truth has a way of emerging, Frost. No matter how carefully buried. Dom met his gaze evenly. Theories require proof, Sullivan. Something you've consistently failed to provide. The security guard's testimony will change that equation, Sullivan countered. Along with other witnesses coming forward now that the wall of fear is cracking. Dom allowed a trace of genuine curiosity to show. You've invested years pursuing this case. One might question whether it's justice you seek or personal vindication. Sullivan's expression hardened. Every criminal believes they're untouchable until the moment they're not. Your moment is approaching. As Dom departed, Eleanor intercepted him near the courthouse steps. I need to speak with you about Noah. They moved to a private alcove away from media and onlookers. Eleanor's expression reflected her internal conflict, the grandmother's love for Noah battling her growing conviction of Dom's guilt. If there's a retrial, she began hesitantly, Noah may need to testify. Dom's response was immediate and absolute. That won't happen. Under any circumstances. The court may not give you a choice, Eleanor countered. And Noah deserves to understand the full truth about his parents. The truth, you believe, is Sullivan's construction, Dom replied with controlled intensity. Noah knows everything he needs to know. Eleanor studied him with sad determination. I've seen the evidence, Dom. Not just Walsh's testimony, but financial records, witness statements. You orchestrated everything. The baby's switch, Vivian's conviction, all of it. And if that were true, Dom challenged, if Vivian and Reynolds had conspired to pass another man's child off as mine, to take half my company, to destroy everything I built, would their punishment be unjustified? Eleanor stepped back, momentarily startled by the implicit admission. That's not for you to decide, and it doesn't justify endangering innocent children. Noah was never in danger, Dom stated with absolute conviction. Everything was calculated to protect him. By switching him with a dying baby, by sentencing his mother to decades in prison. Eleanor's voice rose with emotion. That's not protection, Dom. It's vengeance. Dom reached a decision. Eleanor had irreversibly aligned with Sullivan's perspective. She now represented a potential threat to Noah's stability and Dom's custody. I've always respected you, Eleanor, Dom said with genuine regret. But my priority remains Noah's well-being. Any attempt to separate him from me will have consequences beyond what you can imagine. The implied threat hung between them. Eleanor straightened, her grief for Gregory temporarily overshadowed by newfound resolve. I'll do what's right for Noah, whatever that requires. As Eleanor walked away, Dom recognized a significant shift in the strategic landscape. Eleanor's potential testimony about Noah's well-being had been crucial to Dom's legal position. Her opposition now accelerated the timeline for implementing departure protocols. That evening, Dom accelerated final preparations. Noah was instructed to pack essentials while Dom secured critical documents and irreplaceable items. Bernard coordinated with Theo to establish transportation routes that would evade potential surveillance. As midnight approached, Dom received urgent intelligence. Sullivan had obtained an emergency order for Noah's temporary placement in protective custody pending the evidentiary hearing. Implementation was scheduled for morning. Accelerate timeline, Dom instructed Bernard. Departure in 30 minutes. Noah appeared in the doorway of Dom's study, already dressed and carrying his carefully packed bag. We're leaving now. Dom nodded, impressed by his son's readiness. Sullivan is moving faster than anticipated. As they prepared to depart through a secured garage entrance, Dom's secure phone displayed a message from Sullivan himself. Don't make this worse, Frost. Removing Noah from jurisdiction will trigger immediate federal charges. Dom deleted the message without response. Sullivan's awareness of their imminent departure was concerning, but not surprising. The agent had likely maintained surveillance on the mansion despite the appearance of adhering to legal processes. Bernard reported, primary route compromised. Moving to secondary extraction, Dom guided Noah toward a service elevator leading to an underground tunnel system, a contingency feature installed during the mansion's construction that connected to a neighboring property Dom controlled through proxies. As they moved through the dimly lit passage, Noah maintained remarkable composure for a 5-year-old facing dramatic upheaval. Where are we going? Switzerland initially, Dom explained, respecting Noah's intelligence as always. Then potentially New Zealand, depending on circumstances. What about your company? Everything you built. The question struck Dom with unexpected force. Noah, even at his young age, recognized the magnitude of what Dom was sacrificing to maintain custody. Some things can be rebuilt, Noah. Others are irreplaceable. They emerged at the secondary extraction point where Theo waited with an unmarked vehicle. FBI has established checkpoints on major routes, he reported. Marine option remains viable. Dom nodded, the plan shifting to their tertiary escape route. A private vessel docked at a marina Dom maintained through untraceable ownership. From there, they would transfer to a larger yacht in international waters before continuing to a private airfield beyond federal jurisdiction. As they approached the marina, Dom noticed Noah studying the night sky with unusual intensity. Will we ever come back? The boy asked quietly. For the first time in this ordeal, Dom found himself hesitating. The reality of what they were leaving behind, not just wealth and power, but the life Noah had known, struck him with unexpected emotional force. Perhaps, Dom answered honestly, but not soon, and not as we are now. Noah absorbed this with remarkable maturity before asking the question Dom had been anticipating. Did you do what they say? Frame mother. Dom faced a fundamental choice: continue the narrative Noah had been raised with, or acknowledge a more complex truth. The decision would shape their relationship in a new life they were forced to build. Your mother betrayed us, Dom stated carefully. She and Reynolds planned to take you away from me, to use you as leverage for her financial gain. I discovered their plan and ensured justice prevailed. By making sure she was punished, Noah concluded. By ensuring you remained safe with me, Dom corrected. Everything else was secondary. Noah considered this with the analytical intensity that mirrored Dom's own thought processes. You never forgive those who betray you. It wasn't a question, but a recognition of fundamental truth. Betrayal has consequences, Dom confirmed. That principle has protected us and will continue to do so. As they boarded the vessel that would carry them toward their new identity, Dom received one final message. Not from Sullivan or authorities, but from Eleanor. Whatever you've done, Noah deserves better. He deserves truth. Dom deleted the message without response, though its substance lingered uncomfortably. As the marina lights receded behind them, Dom watched Noah standing at the vessel's rail, his small figure silhouetted against the fading lights of Boston, the only home he'd known, now replaced by an uncertain future shaped by the consequences of betrayal and retribution. In that moment, Dom recognized that his son had inherited more than his intelligence and determination. Noah had absorbed his fundamental philosophy, that loyalty was absolute, betrayal unforgivable, and consequences inescapable. Whether this represented success or failure in his parenting remained to be determined. What remained certain was Dom's unwavering resolve. Those who had threatened his family would never be forgiven. Those who had aided them would never be forgotten, and anyone who attempted to separate him from his son would face the full measure of his relentless determination, regardless of distance, time, or legal boundaries. As international waters approached, Dom placed his hand on Noah's shoulder. "This isn't an ending," he assured him, "merely a strategic repositioning." Noah looked up at his father with eyes that reflected both childlike trust and unsettling maturity. "Understand, father. Some battles require retreat before victory." Dom nodded, recognizing his own philosophy echoed in his son's words. Whatever came next, Sullivan's continued pursuit, Vivian's potential release, Eleanor's moral stand, the fundamental equation remained unchanged. Dom would protect what was his by any means necessary, without forgiveness, without compromise, without regret. The manhunt that followed would make international headlines. The revelations about Dom's orchestration would shock Boston society. The legal proceedings would establish new precedents in criminal conspiracy law. But Dom and Noah Frost, or rather, the new identities they would assume, watched these developments from a carefully secured compound on another continent, beyond the reach of American jurisdiction. Sullivan would continue his pursuit with unwavering determination. Vivian would eventually secure release through a negotiated plea that acknowledged the complexity